We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred.
These dangerous fringe groups have no place in American public life.
If we want to come together, we need to move away from identity politics and focus on the American national identity.
Tensions reach a boiling point with North Korea. The U.S. is preparing to fight and to win.
We're on a collision course with North Korea. President Trump inherited a mess. To all those smart people who are criticizing his rhetoric and his policy, how well did you do?
A police officer shot at point-blank range, and he survives.
Take your hands out your pocket! Dispatch, Echo 7, I'm hit. I'm hit. Dispatch, please tell my family I love them.
Two of my family members actually came up there, one of them praying for me on the side of the road, saying I will live. But those words and prayers that they have given me, and I'm just grateful for them.
Always nifty. We have a lot of cameras. We got a lot of lights. Live from Studio F, as in Fox and Friends, right up here on the mezzanine level of that building right there. It is the world's #1 cable morning news show, thanks to you. And look who's in for Ainsley and Brian this week.
Thanks for having us.
Pete and Abby.
You're stuck with us for the week. But we're happy to be here, Steve.
It's great to have you.
Yeah.
It'll be. There's a lot of news going on, and a lot that we've been talking about.
We ramp it up on the weekends for you, and then we hand it off.
Thank you. Good job over the weekend.
All right, going straight to a Fox News alert. It is Monday, and tensions still boiling over nationwide following Charlottesville's deadly rally.
Anti-protesters turning Washington State's peaceful freedom rally in Seattle into chaos, clashing with some police officers on the streets there.
The protesters, as you can see, seen armed with axe handles and 2x4s, taunting police and inciting violence. Officers in riot gear forced to use pepper spray and flash bang grenades to keep the anti-protesters separated. Watch.
Larry, just stay against the wall.
When I come peacefully, I bring 2x4s. 3 people arrested for obstruction and assault. Thankfully, no one was hurt.
Meanwhile, another Fox News alert. The federal government now widening its investigation into the Charlottesville attack suspects' apparent hate-filled past.
All of this as Vice President Mike Pence makes it very clear that the Trump administration condemns all hate groups.
Our own Matt Finn live in Charlottesville, Virginia, where a vigil was held last night for the woman who was struck in the violence. Matt, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. It was a violent and deadly weekend here, and now it is a somber and quiet Monday morning. The driver who plowed his car through the crowds, killing a woman and injuring many others, is expected to be arraigned at the district court behind me in just a short while, charged with second-degree murder. And we have a warning of some strong video to show you of that incident this weekend. Police identified the driver as James Field Jr. He plowed his car through a crowd of people. The streets were flooded with a mix of white supremacy groups and counter-protesters at the time. Vice President Pence now saying he and the president condemn the bigotry and violence seen here this weekend.
We have no tolerance for hate and violence from white supremacists, neo-Nazis, or the KKK. These dangerous fringe groups have no place in American public life and in the American debate, and we condemn them in the strongest possible terms.
There was a vigil here last night and in other cities around the country in remembrance of 32-year-old Heather Heyer, and also 2 Virginia state troopers were killed when their chopper went down assisting law enforcement. They are identified as Lieutenant H.J. Cullen and Trooper Pilot Burke Bates. Now, it's not clear if that driver will appear in video or person in the courthouse behind us, and it's also possible that he could be charged with domestic terrorism. And as you mentioned, federal investigators are looking into the possibility that he had some type of assistance when he plowed his car through the crowds here in Charlottesville. this weekend. Back to you guys in New York.
Well, Matt Finn, live in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We thank you very much. Shortly after what happened down in Virginia happened, the President of the United States came out and made a statement. Some, however, said that is way too vague, Mr. President. You've got to get much more specific. And so the White House did just that, and they came out with this statement.
And they were very clear in the statement, Steve. They say the president said very strongly in a statement yesterday that he condemns all forms of violence, bigotry, and hatred. Of course, that includes white supremacists, KKK, neo-Nazi, and all extremist groups. The same thing we heard from his vice president yesterday.
Yeah, and when the president made his initial comment condemning it in the strongest possible terms, hatred and bigotry, we didn't know who this driver was in the vehicle. Now we do. James Alex Fields Jr. We know he was obsessed with Hitler and Nazis. So, of course, they come out and say, we condemn the KKK, white supremacists and neo-Nazis. That's a no-brainer.
Ivanka tweeted afterwards, there should be no place in society for racism, white supremacy, and neo-Nazis. The President of the United States is going to be heading to the White House later today. Actually, at 3 o'clock this afternoon, he's going to have a press availability where he's going to be signing a memo cracking down on China a little bit to try to get them to help us with North Korea. Look for the president to say more about what happened in Virginia later today.
Absolutely.
Look for the press to keep pressing him no matter what, right? I mean, in their mind, nothing is ever good enough, so they'll keep pushing him.
Well, that'll be the first question, no doubt, Steve, out of the gate at this press conference later this afternoon. But as you said, Pete, they have... It seems like an open door now to run with their narrative. When the president come out and call it for what it was, and he may very well do that today. But in their minds, a lot of them, they say we can associate the president with these groups, and that fits a lot of the narrative on the left, a lot of the media, and that is very problematic for society today, for us to even be talking like that.
Of course, because so much of the left sees this world not through America first, but through racial identity politics first. We had a fantastic interview on the program, on this program earlier on with a professor from Vanderbilt, Carol Swain, and she really laid out part of the problem and how we've gotten to this point.
Just coming out and denouncing white supremacy and painting everyone with the same broad brush does not solve the problem. There are black nationalists, there are white nationalists, there are Hispanic nationalists, and so we can't say it's just one group. So the president was correct when he said that there were many forces involved. If we want to come together, we need to move away from identity politics and multiculturalism and focus on the American national identity. That's the only way we're going to be able to get beyond this.
I mean, what other message? I mean, what a fantastic spot-on message. You want to move beyond it by transcending those individual identities and looking toward Americanism, who we are as Americans and ideals that we hold up.
Surely. It's interesting here in I believe it was the New York Post today, a top official at the New York City Police Department was asked if what happened down in Charlottesville could happen here in New York City.
Saw that.
And they said, no, it could not have happened in New York because New York City Police Department keeps rival protesters far from each other. And that has been one of the rap against the police down in Charlottesville is apparently they had met with the organizers ahead of time, and the organizers said that the police officers, simply let it get out of hand. That's going to be part of the investigation to figure out what went.
Yeah, and a wake-up call for the rest of the country, as there are concerns that more of these protests and potential violence could happen.
Well, it
just a wake-up call.
We read about Seattle at the beginning of this block. They were kept separate in Seattle because there is a right to a peaceful assembly in this country, and it does appear that for whatever reason the Charlottesville Police Department did not keep them separate. Again, not to point fingers at the cops, and the president, by the way, in his original statement, praised the police that do the best they can in almost every single instance. But these First Amendment rights are very precious and they have to be defended.
Yeah, well, Steve, you mentioned the press conference with the president later on this afternoon. Of course, this will be talked about what happened in Charlottesville, but also what is going on with North Korea, because that is the top of so many people's minds this morning as they're waking up. And North Korea is now recalling key ambassadors from around the globe as tensions with the U.S. continue to rise. And the president, he continues to put pressure not just on North Korea, but very much so on China, who is responsible for keeping North Korea afloat, especially when it comes to their economy.
Yeah, these ambassadors that North Korea supposedly has, is it the UN, China, and Russia? They've been recalled home. And Steve, as you mentioned, the meetings today are focusing a lot on China and trade, where it looks like we've made some progress.
When you hear that, though, Kim Jong-un has recalled his ambassadors from the United States and China and Russia. Well, they've got no choice. There's a plane waiting for you. Sorry, Mr. Ambassador.
No.
But that that is, that is kind of scary until you realize apparently what they're doing is they're trying to figure out their next step. Because remember, Kim Jong-un last week said he was going to fire off 4 missiles to envelop the country, or rather the territory of Guam. Well, they're a bad shot when it comes to that. And, the United States has made it very clear, you do something stupid like that, the whole world's going to come after you. So that's why he's bringing the ambassadors in to say, okay, guys, now what do we do?
Exactly.
Means he's got them thinking twice. And we've also got China thinking twice. Senator Lindsey Graham had some interesting comments, some great comments on how we got to this place, and asks a question I think a lot of us ask. Take a listen.
I don't think there's an military action is imminent, but we're on a collision course with North Korea. President Trump inherited a mess. To all those smart people who are criticizing his rhetoric and his policy, how well did you do?
How well did you do? Such a great question and such a good point, because you look at how we got to where we are today, right? Maybe it was the rhetoric wasn't tough enough. Maybe we did not speak the language that Kim Jong-un actually recognized and knew how to deal with. And now President Trump is saying, we're going to handle things very differently. If I draw that red line, you better believe I'm going to go through that red line.
And it has been every president going back to Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton used former President Jimmy Carter to broker a deal that the North Koreans ultimately broke.
Sanctions didn't work, direct talks didn't work, UN resolutions haven't worked. What has worked so far, and it's not over, we'll see where it goes, the credible threat of military force. If your adversary doesn't believe you might use it, then they're never going to change their calculus. But you're great point, Steve. You pull back ambassadors to strategize because you probably can't protect your communications. You don't want the other guy to know what you're talking about. And if China really does stop that trade on some levels, that could be a 1-2 punch that changes the game.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. Jillian's here this morning with some other headlines we're following.
That's right. Good morning to you at home as well. We do begin with Fox News alert right now. A manhunt is intensifying for the gunman who killed 3 people at a racetrack in Wisconsin. Police say the victims were shot at point-blank range near a food vendor at the Great Lakes Dragway south of Milwaukee. Police don't know what happened before the shooting. Nearly 5,000 people were at the drag racing event. No one else was hurt. 2 American soldiers are dead, killed while fighting in Iraq. U.S. military officials say the service members died during combat training operations and not by enemy contact. 5 others hurt in the incident. None of the soldiers have been identified. No further details are available at this hour. A new bill putting restrictions on abortions now heading to Texas Governor Greg Abbott's desk. The state Senate passing the measure overnight that would prevent insurance from covering the procedure. It also requires women to buy extra insurance coverage for abortions, except for certain medical emergencies. 10 states have similar laws on the books. Governor Abbott is expected to sign the law. One of golf's young stars completes a huge comeback for his biggest win yet. It all started right here on the 10th green in North Carolina. Justin Thomas's putt for birdie sits on the lip of the cup for 12 seconds. He walks away and it rolls in. Thomas smiling after the lucky drop. It was a sign of good things to come.
Thomas with the finishing touches.
Gotta love that, right? Thomas wins the PGA Championship, shooting a 68 in the final round. It's the 24-year-old's first major tournament win. And I do have to tell you guys, I'm even getting a lot of people tweeting me this morning about the 10-second rule. So I want to just clarify something for you here, if we can. Yeah. So I don't know how much you guys know about this, but
there's a 10-second
rule?
There's
a 10-second rule, and that took about 12 seconds. So people are complaining this isn't legit, right? But here's the thing. A player's given enough time to approach the cup, a couple seconds, right, without delaying the game, then an additional 10 seconds to determine if the ball is at rest. He didn't approach. So he had a couple seconds of wiggle room.
Oh, I wonder if he knew that.
Making it legit.
It reminded me of Caddyshack. Just my.
Of course your mind was.
I know, right? I've also been getting a lot of that this morning, too.
That is a great moment, though. For him.
Mr. Lucky.
Yeah. Woof.
All right, straight ahead on this Monday. Thank you, Jillian. President Trump preparing to return to New York City for the first time as president, and protesters are already in hysterics. Rob Schmidt is live at Trump Tower on 5th Avenue, getting ready. Hey, Rob.
Hey, guys, good morning. Yeah, he came back. The president came back yesterday, had some protests, expected to come back again today, and expected to have more protests. The barriers are up, all in response to what he said in regards to what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. We'll have more on that coming up.
Thanks, Rob. And here we go again. More NFL players following the lead of Colin Kaepernick and protesting our national anthem. We'll bring that to you next.
Welcome back. Well, today protesters expected to greet President Trump on his first trip back home to New York City since taking office.
Hundreds of demonstrators giving a preview of what to expect, flooding the streets outside Trump Tower this weekend, angry over the president's response to the deadly Charlottesville rally.
Those pictures were yesterday. Rob Schmidt is live outside Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue right this second. Hey, Rob.
Yeah, hey guys, no protests yet this morning. It's a little early, but yesterday we saw some as the president came back home. Just briefly yesterday afternoon, we heard the same chants we've been hearing for quite some time now outside of Trump Tower. No Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA. We've got some video of what happened yesterday afternoon here. This all in response to how the president responded to what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, not specifically calling out white supremacy for that attack, instead making a broader claim there. And he does have some things to do here in New York. He is expected to be here for a few days, although that could change. He's going to Washington right now to work on some things in regards to China, which he says there are some issues with. He's got some things to work out there, but he actually did get some good news from China this morning when it came across that China is going to stop making purchases from North Korea as far as coal and fish and one or two other items that they will no longer buy from them. Of course, China probably one of the only countries that's making any big purchases from North Korea, funding a lot of what they do. So he got some good news from China there, but he says there's still work to be done. He has some issues to take up with them. And then he's got a big phone call tonight at 9:30 to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, another nervous person right now with North Korea weaponized with nuclear weapons, sitting right there across a small body of water away from North Korea and well within their range. And so he's going to talk with Shinzo Abe later tonight, and he could very well be here until Wednesday is what we are hearing right now. We'll send it here in Manhattan, I should say. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Rob Schmidt right there on Fifth Avenue. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Well, Iran just voted to increase spending on missiles. Fantastic. Since when was that part of that fantastic and great Iran deal? Well, a former member of President Obama's State Department will be here live to discuss.
And he was killed fighting for our freedom when his Black Hawk helicopter was shot down over Iraq. But his sacrifice lives on through another hero, his Gold Star wife. She joins us with her journey coming up next on Fox and Friends live from New York City. Good morning, Pete.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends. Some quick headlines for you. At least 4 people are shot dead in the Mexican resort of Acapulco. The area has become a hotspot for drug violence. Mexico recorded more than 12,000 homicides in the first half of the year. That's a 31% increase from 2016. Also a major concern in Mexico, illicit alcohol. Officials seizing 10,000 gallons from a manufacturer that supplies tourist hotspots. 2 bars also shut down in a series of raids of restaurants and nightclubs. Among those suspended, a bar at the same hotel where a 20-year-old American woman drowned after reportedly drinking tainted alcohol. Abby, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Pete. Well, on January 20th, 2007, Army Major Michael Taylor made the ultimate sacrifice. You can see him right there when his Black Hawk helicopter was shot down during a mission in Iraq. Well, now his wife is here, and she is sharing the story of her journey after such a life-changing loss. Wendy Taylor, author of the new book, Undefeated, a war widow story of faith and survival, and she joins us right now. Wendy,
good morning.
It's really good to have you with us. And we were saying in the commercial break, it happened 10 years ago, but
it still feels like it was yesterday. I still miss him just as much as I did the first day.
And you talk about the role of a soldier's wife, and every time he would leave, your heart would ache.
It did. It sure did. And it just, I ache for him now, but yeah, I never fully, I didn't always know what he was doing when he was gone. And I missed him terribly. And it's hard for a soldier's wife to hold the fort down for him until they get back home with your children and everything, plus worrying about their safety, but you just have to be strong and support them. They need to know that they have that support at home.
Absolutely.
And that allows them to do their job and not be distracted.
And there was one day where he didn't come home in 2007,
Right.
where his Black Hawk helicopter, it crashed.
Yeah.
And you were told that devastating news. Your life changed forever.
It did.
What was the hardest part about that moment for you?
The hardest part was telling my children. I did not want to do that. And I remember I called them downstairs and they both sat on the couch. And as I went down on my knees, I said, God, how much more do I have to do? And I remember my daughter said, is it bad? And I said, yes. And they both looked at me and they said, is he okay? And I said, no, he died. And just the wailing that came from them was just horrific. And I think I felt myself leave at that moment. The old Wendy was gone. That was the hardest part. That's still the hardest part of this journey, was having to tell them.
Your beautiful family, we can see on that screen there. Beautiful
that was on
girl,
4th of July.
boy, and their dad, and they will always remember him as being a hero to them and to you. You know, we talk so much about our military and our veterans and just all the amazing things that they're doing to protect this country, but often that gets lost is the family.
Yes.
And the spouse and the role that they play.
Yes.
In supporting them and holding down the fort and also just being strong. Where do you find that strength?
God. He is the only reason that I got through this whole thing. And there was a moment when I just had to completely surrender to him. And this was after Michael passed. And I just gave everything over to him, and he took care of me. But that's really the only way you're going to ever get through any of this, is to rely on God to help you get through it.
This hits home for so many,
yes,
so many people, so many families. I've got 2 brothers that are about to go out and do their missions, and my brother's wife, he's a pilot in the Navy. She just texted me and she said, you know, they just had a baby boy. She said, he's going to leave me for 9 months. I'm already trying to emotionally get prepared for this.
Yeah.
What message do you have for her and so many others that are about to go through this journey?
Right. Just be patient, and just be very supportive to your spouse. Let them know that everything is okay at home, and then that way they're not distracted on whatever mission that they have. That helps them to focus and to get home sooner.
If you could say one thing to your husband today, what would that be?
That I miss him every day. I miss him every day, and I can't wait to see him again. That's what I would say.
Wendy, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And your husband will never be forgotten. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
He's a hero.
Thank you.
All right, more Fox and Friends to come.
We are back with a Fox News alert. In an unprecedented move, China is cutting off North Korean imports amid the rogue nation's escalating war of words with the U.S.
This as President Trump is reportedly set to order an investigation into China's trade practices, which could, of course, lead to American sanctions against Beijing.
David Lee Miller is live in Bridgewater, New Jersey, not far from where the president spent this weekend with the very latest. David, I'm confused. I thought that China was helping us out with North Korea. If that's the case, then why is the president going to clamp down on China?
That indeed is a very good question. There has been cooperation by the Chinese. They voted for the sanctions in the United Nations a week or so ago. But the president says that the issue of trade is a separate issue. Yet at the same time, the administration wants to continue pressuring China to lean on North Korea. Let me give you a little context to all of this right now. As you mentioned, trade, and specifically trade with China, is going to be a key item on the agenda today. And just a short time ago, at 6:54 this morning, the president tweeted out the following. I'm going to quote the tweet. "The obstructionist Democrats have given us, or not fixed, some of the worst trade deals in world history. I am changing that fast." So what's going to happen later today, President Trump expected to fly to Washington to sign paperwork, specifically a document called an executive memorandum that will authorize an investigation into how China treats U.S. companies that are doing business there. The investigation is going to focus on whether or not China is forcing some of those companies to reveal intellectual property in order to do business, or if in fact there is simply outright theft. Now, the outcome of this investigation could lead to a tariff on Chinese products, but that would be considerably far off in the future. This investigation could take about a year. The investigation comes, as you mentioned, at a very sensitive time. Mr. Trump urging China to pressure North Korea to halt its nuclear weapons program, but senior administration officials say that national security and trade issues are two distinct, very separate things, and that the trade paperwork being signed today has nothing to do with what's happening with North Korea. And lastly, what's the official reaction, you might wonder, from China? Well, officially, no reaction, but Chinese newspaper that is a state newspaper has warned of a possible trade war in the future. Back to you.
All right, David Lee Miller out in Jersey. Thank you very much.
You explained it very well, your question. If you're beginning an investigation, it could bring you future leverage.
But we need them now to squeeze North Korea.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, okay, we're going to squeeze them, we're going to cut off the coal, but there are other ways.
Right.
That's right.
That
Challenge
they can
is,
help them.
how mad can you make China before they just say, fine, we're not helping?
We might be about to find out.
Yeah, we will see. Stay tuned.
All right.
Good stuff.
25 minutes before the top of the hour, and Jillian's got some more headlines.
Good morning from upstairs in the studio. Hopefully your morning's off to a good start. A police officer is shot at point-blank range and survives. South Carolina officer Quincy Smith, wearing a body camera as his attacker opened fire. The message to his family and what he thought was his last breath will give you chills. We do want to warn you, some of you might find this video disturbing.
Take your hands out your pocket! Take your hands out your pocket! Shoot fire! Dispatch, Echo 7, I'm hit. I'm hit in my neck someplace. Dispatch, please tell my family I love them.
Officer Smith joined us earlier saying his family helped him fight to stay alive.
With those words and prayers that they have given me, and I'm just grateful for them.
Officer Smith hopes to return to duty very soon, so a good ending there. Senator Marco Rubio may be on top of a Venezuelan hit list. The Florida senator has been a harsh critic of the socialist regime. DHS says the threat came from Diosdado Cabello, President Nicolas Maduro's right-hand man. Rubio called him the Pablo Escobar of Venezuela. DHS says they can't confirm the details of the assassination plot, but they aren't taking any chances, increasing Rubio's security detail. More football players are standing with Colin Kaepernick by taking a seat during the national anthem. Last night, Seahawks defensive end Michael Bennett sat on the bench with a towel on his head as the rest of his team stood for the anthem at a preseason game. Oakland Raiders running back Marshawn Lynch sat down on Saturday night and, as you can see, ate a banana instead of honoring his country. Tom Cruise's mission incomplete. The superstar tries and fails at his own stunts. You have to see this TMZ video. Cruise crashing into the side of a building while filming Mission Impossible 6 in London. The actor seen limping after the jump. No word on the extent of his injuries. The 55-year-old is known for doing his own action stunts for movies. So look at your headlines. I will send it back downstairs to you guys.
All right, Jillian, thank you very much. You know, in the actual movies, you never see the cables that he's hooked up to.
Oh, that's true. They seem to be able to whitewash those out. They can, you know, is that what they do?
They airbrush them out.
What's that white stuff you use on envelopes when you? What's that called?
Whiteout.
Yeah, I don't think you do that in the movies anymore, though.
Should we toss it out to Adam for some weather?
Why not?
Okay.
No, you guys seem to be doing great. I would just continue down that line of thought you guys were having.
All right.
All right, yeah, I can take. All right, we've got a pretty good crowd that's really beginning to come together out here. We got a fan who's been out here for the last hour or so. You wanted to give a shout out to some family members, right?
That's correct. I wanted to say happy anniversary to my daughter Glida and son Michael Nixon. It's 25th anniversary today.
25 years. Well, congratulations to them. You guys have all gotten really a nice forecast here for your Monday in New York City. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case for everyone across the country. Let's take a look at some of those weather maps and see what's happening from coast to coast. Dry mostly here on the eastern side of the country, but again, and we've been seeing this here the last several weeks, monsoonal moisture really piling into the western half of the country. Every time you get into an afternoon, we get really heavy rain. There has been flash flooding in some of those areas, so it's something to consider if you're out that way. I do want to show real quickly Tropical Storm Gert that continues to spin. Eventually that's going to become a hurricane. Good news is every indication is that it's going to turn away from the United States. Maybe just some choppy seas along the East Coast, guys, but no worries about that eventually hitting the coast.
All right, Adam, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's beautiful out. Thanks, Adam.
All right. Meanwhile, Iran just voted to increase spending on missiles. Huh? Was that part of the deal we signed under the last administration? Apparently it's okay. At least we're going to talk to a former member of President Obama's State Department. Going to be with us next to discuss.
And a brand new baby boom is happening apparently at the zoo. And now we know exactly why. That's coming up.
Not just you.
It's everywhere.
The country of Iran just voted to spend $800 million on ballistic missiles and its military. And during the vote, some parliament members were heard chanting "Death to America" in Farsi. Great. Well, this after the United States passed more economic sanctions on the #1 state sponsor of terror. So does this fall in line with the Iran nuke deal that we brokered? Here for a debate, we've got former State Department official under President Obama, David Tafuri. He's in London today. And Rebecca Heinrichs, Hudson Institute fellow and former military and foreign policy advisor to Republican Arizona Congressman Trent Franks. Good morning to both of you.
Morning.
David, good morning. Let's start with you. When I heard that they were spending hundreds of millions of dollars on missiles, I was thinking, wait, what? They can't do that, can they?
You know, this has been a problem. Iran has continued to test and develop ballistic missiles. Now, this is not specifically prohibited under the letter of the Iran nuclear deal agreement, but it certainly violates the spirit of that agreement. But the nuclear deal was focused on just getting Iran to give up its ambitions to develop nuclear weapons. It did not specifically limit it from testing ballistic missiles and developing ballistic missiles. Now, the parliament's decision to put more money into missiles is unfortunate, and it's unfortunate for the relationship with the West and with the U.S., but it was appropriate for us to put sanctions in place, and if it continues to develop missiles, especially if it develops missiles that can be used to deliver nuclear weapons, more sanctions are appropriate.
Sure. Rebecca, I remember during the arguments from the administration at the time of the deal, they were saying, look, the country of Iran just wants the atomic power, the atomic program so they can develop peaceful energy. Well, you don't need missiles to keep the lights on.
No, the missile program is the sign that the Iranians were never going to just have a peaceful nuclear program. Missiles are the delivery systems for nuclear warheads. Missiles go hand in glove with the warheads. And in the past, whenever we've actually successfully had repentant nuclear proliferators or missile proliferators, like in South Africa and Libya, whenever they gave up their programs, their nuclear programs, they also gave up their missile programs because they go together. Sure. So this was something that the Obama administration said that they wanted to do. They wanted to restrict the missiles. They didn't because the Iranians simply didn't want them to. So once again, you know, whenever you negotiate, the party that's willing to walk away from the deal if it's a bad deal is the one that has the stronger hand. In this case, it was the Iranians. It was not the Obama administration, so we got a bad deal.
David, it looks to some like the Iranians are just thumbing their nose at the United States. Okay, we got the deal. We got the money back. Now we're going to build some missiles.
Well, I can understand why people feel that way. I mean, first of all, let's dispense with the idea that Iran has a democracy. Its parliament voted for this, but the agenda for the parliament is set by Iran's theocracy. And so it's religiously motivated hardliners who put in place this policy, who are pushing forward on the missile program. And yes, they're thumbing their nose at the United States and at the West. It's not appropriate. But at the same time, we should put this in context. It's actually not a lot of money. It's not going to advance their missile program that much. It's more just sending a signal to the U.S., a bad signal, and one that we need to confront and respond to by either putting in place more sanctions or making it clear that we will not tolerate Iran doing much more to develop its ballistic missile systems. Certainly, they cannot be allowed to develop a missile that could be used to deliver a nuclear warhead.
And of course, Rebecca, that's what we said about the country of North Korea.
That's exactly right. And again, the Iran deal, you know, all these sanctions relief is going to go not only towards exporting terrorism, which the Iranians continue to do, it's going to go to the missile program. What the Iran deal was essentially a jobs program for Iranian missile scientists. And by the way, they cooperate with the North Koreans. So as we watch what's happening with North Korea, you better believe that once North Korea develops the capability, they're going to export that to Iran. So again, this was a fatally flawed deal. This is why so many of us opposed it for so long. And now the Trump administration has dealt with this problem. What do you do when you've got this deal in place and the Iranians aren't violating it by building the missile systems that are going to be used for delivery systems once the Iran deal expires, or they decide to break away from the deal and go ahead and go forward with their nuclear program?
Speaking of the Iran deal, let's hear the President of the United States talk about it. We know he doesn't like it.
They are not in compliance with the agreement, and they are certainly not in the spirit of the agreement in compliance. And I think you'll see some very strong things taking place if they don't get themselves in compliance.
Okay, so Dave, you got to figure those very strong things would be more sanctions, although the president just did sign tougher sanctions against the country last week.
Yeah, well, I just want to point out, President Trump has said that, and he also said during the campaign he was going to rip up the Iran nuclear deal on his first day in office. However, his administration has now certified twice to Congress that Iran is complying with the deal. So what the administration is actually communicating to Congress under its requirement to report to Congress on the prospects of the deal and how the deal is going in compliance is actually at odds with what he's saying and what you just quoted him as saying.
All right, Rebecca, we'll give you the final word on this.
Yeah, the big problem with the Iran deal is that it gave the Iranians basically everything they wanted. We're going to continue watching. The Iranians watch very carefully to make sure that they abide by the letter of the agreement. There's been some indications that they're already not, but it's very difficult to verify this agreement completely. But again, this makes it very difficult for the Trump administration because you have all these other countries now investing in the country, in Iran, and so you're going to have to get everybody else to agree too whenever we decide to pull out of this agreement. It's a tough spot, but again, the Iranians are developing these missiles. The Obama administration cut missile defense, and that puts us in a very vulnerable position.
It does look like it. All right, Rebecca and David, thank you very much for joining us for this discussion this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, coming up on this Monday, a brand new baby boom is happening at the zoo, and I think we've finally figured out why. But first, let's check in with Shannon Bream for a preview of what happens here on the channel in 11 minutes.
All right, Steve. Well, you know, tensions continue to simmer in Charlottesville as we are learning more about the suspect now facing murder charges. Where do we go from here? And the CIA director says he does not believe a North Korea attack on the U.S. is imminent, but we're prepared for anything, and he's backing the president's tough talk. Plus, a new move by special counsel Bob Mueller in the Russia probe. We're going to talk to Judge Napolitano about exactly what it means. And the president takes a quick trip to Washington as the White House faces new talk of internal conflicts and growing pressure to score a legislative win as soon as the recess wraps. We'll see you for America's Newsroom, top of the hour.
Are you guys ready for this? It is a Match.com of sorts, but for animals. Zoos are playing matchmakers, and the love connections, they are working. One zoo is seeing a baby boom.
Joining us right now to tell us more about how it works is the executive director of the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, Thane Maynard, who's got a little critter there. Thane, who is that you've got in your hand?
Good morning, you guys. I'm here with Cruncher. Aww. And Cruncher is a less than 1-year-old baby alligator. And you probably know alligators used to be endangered, but they've made a great comeback. And zoos play a role in trying to protect wildlife. You know, our job is to inspire people with animals, but also explain how the world works and why protecting nature is good for people. At our zoo this year, we've had a wide variety of babies. The most famous, of course, is Fiona the hippo. She's a global hit, I can tell you. But we've also had critically endangered species born at our zoo. We've had a black rhinoceros named Kendi. We've had red pandas. We've had critically endangered Malayan tigers, as well as critically endangered ring-tailed lemurs, and also colobus monkeys. Yeah. So we have a lot of babies this year.
Thane, so explain, I mean, I know we conjured up the image of Match.com for zoos, but you're saying you're taking a new approach to what others, I guess I've always assumed was just nature's way. How are you doing it differently?
Well, it is important in zoos today for keepers and for curators to very carefully match animals. It's not exactly like a website like Match.com, but it sort of is an international computer dating system for animals. The reason it's so important is very few creatures in zoos today come from out in the wild. They're born at other zoos, and so being concerned about their genetics, making sure you're not inbreeding them, is vitally important. Mm-hmm. So there are more than 450 species that are part of a thing called the SSP, the Species Survival Plan. Experts get together twice a year. They look very carefully at who would be best to breed with whom, and then we go from there. Now, it is complex because animals aren't always a good match, as it were. That might be, you know, their personality or their temperament.
Sure.
It might be, does a given zoo have space for each animal, as well as how many zoos need a new rhinoceros or tiger or elephant.
Well, let me
just like human beings, right?
Well, yeah, let me ask you this thing. Okay, so if you take that, let's say, once that crocodile alligator is big enough and you breed it with another zoo, who winds up with the offspring? Because there would be two zoos vying for it.
Well, that's a very important question. And the key thing is that accredited zoos that are in the AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, all have an agreement here in North America that when babies are born in zoos, we're responsible for them for the rest of their lives. So that doesn't mean they have to stay at our zoo, but it does mean they would have to go to an accredited facility. So part of that's part of the very careful consideration, and part of why you don't want to overbreed animals.
Sure.
Sometimes species in zoos will be on birth control, so you're able to manage the population and end up with the right number of animals in the right places.
I'm learning a lot.
But I can't overemphasize how important paying attention to the genetic future of zoos is.
All right, Thane Maynard, great to have you with us. Really interesting stuff.
Thanks a lot.
I've learned a lot about animals I had no idea.
Animal birth control. Who knew?
All right, we'll be right back.